But without proper cultural context, I honestly can't tell if Dracula's interest in and image of the women of Japan qualifies as fetishization of Asian women, or if it's supposed to be a satire of the Western fetishization of Asian women. Somebody somewhere is fetishizing, though. Okay, this time I do have the cultural context, and it doesn't help me understand it one bit. Not many lives start as inauspiciously as Udo Kier's. Born in 1944 to a seamstress in Cologne, Lindenthal, the hospital where Udo was born was destroyed in a bombing raid almost immediately after his birth. Both he and his mother were buried beneath the rubble, but his mother was able to free herself and her newborn baby and get to safety. She would raise her son as a single mother. As a child, Kier was an altar boy and a chorus member, and as he entered young adulthood, he would occasionally perform in drag, imitating Italian singer Caterina Valente. He trained as a wholesaler after his graduation from school, and ultimately took a job on an assembly line at a Ford factory. But the work was not for him. Young Udo Kier had striking eyes and delicate features with a slim build, and he was exactly what the fashion industry was looking for in a model at the time. He began working in front of photographers and on the runway, which afforded him the opportunity to travel and live outside of his native Germany. By the age of 19, he had relocated to London and was earning a living as a waiter, working on his English, and attending drama school in the evenings. In 1964, he moved to Rome and resumed work as a magazine model. He would make his screen debut in the 1966 short from Michael Sarney, Road to Saint-Tropez. He quickly garnered the attention of directors across Europe, both for his large-eyed, waifish look and for his willingness to take on roles strange and unusual, leading him to be cast as many Lost in the Wilderness-style characters. In 1970, he starred as a witch hunter in the German horror film, I am going to mangle this title, Hexen bis aufs Blut gequält. That title translates to English roughly as Witches Tortured Till They Bleed. But it was probably better for marketing purposes that Hallmark Releasing retitled it Mark of the Devil for the American market. It is infamous for a marketing campaign that included giving audience members sick bags along with their tickets, just in case the gore depicted proved to be too much for their stomachs. He would also appear in 1972's The Salzburg Connection, based on the novel by Helen McInnes, but the film performed poorly at the box office. Arguably, the films that elevated him to cult star status in America, however, were the Andy Warhol-produced and Paul Morrissey-directed 1-2 punch of Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula. By the end of the 70s, roles in The Story of O and Dario Argento's Suspiria had firmly entrenched him in the mind of American audiences as a genre and exploitation star, even as he continued working in a wide variety of roles in Europe. He worked all over the world, but until the early 90s, he made his permanent home in an artist's colony in Cologne. He dabbled in music in the 1980s, releasing a single entitled Der Adler that would later feature in the soundtrack to 1991's My Own Private Idaho. Cult stardom in the 70s was very lucrative for a lot of actors who survived to reach the 1990s. And Kier found himself with a steady stream of guest roles and cameos throughout the 90s, including roles on SeaQuest 2032, The Red Shoe Diaries, Nash Bridges, and Viper, as well as movie roles in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, Johnny Mnemonic, Barb Wire, and The End of Violence. Oh, and he was also in this obscure little indie romance entitled, what was it? Blade. The early 2000s saw him as Albin Grau in Shadow of the Vampire, as well as in the role where many PC gamers will probably recognize him, Yuri, in the full-motion video sequences from the game Command & Conquer: Red Alert 2. The 2000s have seen him starring and guest starring in an increasing number of American genre productions, including voicing Herbert Ziegler in The Batman, and appearing as Captain Varna in Dracula 3000.
I don't drink coffee.
No, not 2000, 3000, which is a movie about Dracula in space. He has also become a favorite ensemble member of Danish director Lars von Trier, and starred as the voice of Professor Pericles in Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, a series that was gone all too soon.
The only thing to do left is to pack your personal belongings.
I just wish to take some books, my dried flowers, a few birds.
No flowers, no birds. They'll fall apart in the car. They are not meant to leave the house.
Neither am I.
Andy Warhol's experiments in film began with avant-garde shorts in 1963, with his first being Kiss. His movies frequently featured the Warhol superstars, people whom he had met and found interesting, and therefore decided he was going to promote. Among those superstars was Army veteran, filmmaker, and self-described right-winger Paul Morrissey. Morrissey first met Warhol in 1965, and Warhol asked Morrissey to help contribute ideas to his film projects. In short order, Morrissey signed a management contract with Warhol that saw him being placed in charge of all operations at Warhol's art factory, with the exception of artwork sales. Morrissey's filmmaking style was built using 16mm news cameras that recorded sound directly to film, which made them perfect for loose, improvisational filmmaking. During a chance meeting with Roman Polanski in 1973, Polanski gave Morrissey the idea that he should consider shooting a 3D film about Frankenstein, calling it, quote, the most absurd option I could imagine. So in 1973, Morrissey and fellow superstars / Warhol's favorite nude model, Joe D'Alessandro, came to Italy to make Flesh for Frankenstein. While they were there, the duo decided to just straight up Roger Corman the whole deal and simultaneously produce a second film using almost the exact same cast and crew. That second film was Blood for Dracula. Initially, Morrissey planned to use the same improvisational dialogue method of filmmaking that he and D'Alessandro had had success with in the movie Flesh. Not Flesh for Frankenstein, just Flesh. But it wasn't long before the two discovered that their largely European cast just couldn't work that way. Instead, Morrissey tried to recreate the improvisational feel by dictating brand new dialogue to his typist, Pat Hackett, every morning before the scenes would begin shooting later that day. They used largely Italian talent on their production crew, and members of the cast for both films include popular European directors who stepped in to act in a scene or two. In fact, the father of the ill-fated family in Blood for Dracula is played by Vittorio De Sica, who directed Shoeshine, the first foreign film to receive an honorary Oscar for high quality, which was the precursor to the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. Popular Italian director and giallo master Antonio Margheriti is credited as the director in the on-screen credits for both films, but everyone involved, including Margheriti himself, has said that this was a legal convenience to allow the film to claim Italian nationality for production purposes. Margheriti does claim to have directed only a handful of special effects shots and scenes between Silvia Dionisio and Vittoria De Sica, but Udo Kier and other actors have been adamant that they never even saw Margheriti on set.
The blood of these whores is killing me. I just want my coffin bag to sleep in.
Where do I start with Udo Kier's Dracula? As the movie begins, we actually get a fairly standard-looking and sounding Dracula, dressed stylishly in solid black, proclaiming his boredom with the world around him as he watches his last surviving vampire relative enter into a state of permanent hibernation in the vault. This Dracula has lost his entire family to a lack of virgin blood. Apparently he needs specifically virgin blood to live, and the good families of Romania are too familiar with the Dracula name to volunteer their daughters anymore. These early scenes depict an ethereal, otherworldly figure who has to use makeup to look even vaguely human, but who can't apply his own makeup because, wouldn't you know it, vampires don't reflect in mirrors. His personality is solid ennui given human form, and his design suggests what Tim Burton would create if you asked him to do a movie about sexy Edgar Allan Poe, although he would probably cast Johnny Depp in that. It's only once Dracula is dragged out of the castle to Italy by his servant on a quest for fresh, unsuspecting virgins that Dracula's facade drops. This Dracula is not the icon of cool that he appears to be when he is safely inside his castle, but rather a bizarre mashup of Peter Lorre and Don Knotts. He's overwhelmingly neurotic, eyes bulging and mouth gaping at the slightest provocation, and capable of not only whining, but throwing actual physical temper tantrums like a spoiled toddler when he doesn't get his way. In many ways, Kier's performance undermines the idea of Dracula as a romantic lead. And that's even before the first time we see him convulse and vomit blood after drinking from someone who turns out not to be a virgin. You have to admire Kier's physicality and absolute commitment to a bit. It isn't long before Dracula is at the core of a gory grand guignol of blood-soaked slapstick. I'm not sure that this movie can be said to really have a protagonist. Dracula's chief opponent is Mario Bellato, a worker on the property of the Marchea di Fiore, who is played by D'Alessandro, making absolutely no attempt to hide the fact that he's originally from Pensacola, Florida. And he's kind of like the grim, gritty version of Gaston from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. He's not only vain, preening, and violent with a bad temper, but he's also a serial rapist, involved in a three-way sexual relationship with the two middle daughters of the family. So yeah, if you're tracking the movie down, just be aware that there are some hella big trigger warnings for this one. The ending leaves you unclear as to who you're supposed to root for. That is, if you're supposed to root for anybody at all. It's entirely possible that the whole point of it is to feel like nobody should win, and to be disappointed regardless of who finally gets their way. Yeah, I actually feel like I have the cultural context for this movie, and I still can't quite work out which way the satire is supposed to cut. It's hard to track the box office success of Blood for Dracula because it released in multiple edits across multiple territories under multiple titles. Also, as an independent production filmed simultaneously with and largely on the same budget as another movie, we don't exactly have studio reports on the budget expenditures to compare with what we do know of the box office take, which is that it made 345,023,214 Italian lira on its release in Italy. In the UK, the film's running time was cut by 3 minutes in order to squeak by censors and avoid classification as a video nasty. The US initially saw release of the movie with an X rating, although a later edition was released with 12 minutes cut to receive an R from the MPAA. That edition of the film was targeted to play as a B feature with Young Frankenstein and was retitled Young Dracula. Yes, the exact same trick that was pulled with the David Niven starring Vampira. Critics lauded the film's look and style, but were largely turned off by the violence and the taboo-breaking storyline. Andy Warhol is credited as a producer on the film, and his name was used to market both movies worldwide, as they sometimes saw release under the titles Andy Warhol's Frankenstein and Andy Warhol's Dracula. However, when asked by New York Times reporter Paul Gardner exactly what he had contributed to the movie, Warhol responded, "I go to the parties." What do you think of Udo Kier's take on Dracula? It is definitely a very different version of the character. Drop down into the comments below and let me know what you think. While you're down there, make sure that you click like and subscribe, and there's also a bell that you can ring if you haven't already, which will let you get notifications whenever a video updates on this channel. Also, don't forget to click that share button and share with your friends, because after all, sharing is caring. Until next time, I am Glenn Williams, the film optimist, reminding you to watch like it means something.